February 22nd. My name's Will, if you don't know me, and we are here to celebrate the release of Ruth's book, Casting. This is really a special moment for me. I've known Ruth for, 15 years or so, something like that. And since 2013, she and I and Oren Domenico have been swapping poems back and forth, usually, through email. I was living outside of the area for a good 5 years or so, and one of the ways we stayed in touch was to send each other poems. And she's had a huge influence on what I read and how I read and how I write, too. And I've been lucky to see her develop these beautiful, beautiful poems. In 2013, we did a small chapbook for her, and I always wanted to do a full-length collection. I felt that she more than deserved her own book of poetry, and I wanted to do that for her. And finally, we got to do it. So, and here it is.
Thank you, Will. And thank you all for coming inside on the first day you might have been outside in about a week and a half. I'm just going to start reading because otherwise I'm just going to get nervous. I have a million people to thank. I'm going to do that. I'm going to start right now, actually. Starting with Will for everything he just told you. And Colleen is back there with him. She is the artist for the unbelievably beautiful cover. And my friend Audrey's back there, who's did the photograph of me and made me look good. She's sitting next to Carol, who let us take that picture in her backyard. And my friend Kathy, who might be listening on the live stream, wrote the blurb for the book. So thanks to everybody that made this come together. The title is Casting, and Frances and I were just talking about all the different castings. She and Joe came up with one more that I left out. And I'm going to start with the title poem. Casting. Shedding skins as I grow, I find myself no longer anybody's wife, nobody's teacher. It won't be long before I am nobody's daughter either. My neighbors have moved away, friends and cousins fade. I never was a sister. Struggling to stand alone in this same old body, I wonder who I can be next. I choose grandmother, not just to my own children's children, to any earth or being in my little acre of influence. Grown into witch woman like my own, hands lost in plants, fingers falling among petals, I feel myself slither between sentences, flick my forked tongue over words, wind my sinuous body around an idea, and squeeze meaning out of it. The life I cannot lose without falling aside, dried, shriveled, empty. The little writer, made or born, a long inner core, cold-blooded, ready, hissing at the injustice of a world that lets everyone lose everything. Thanks. This next one, this next one's a true story, and the other participant isn't here yet. She's at ballet class, but she will be around. It's called 5 Tests on Friday. All you educators out there, I hope you agree with me. Wait a second. Here, I'm going to pause. They're coming in right now. Yeah, don't turn around. We have saved you seats. Come on up.
I forgot my coffee from so I have to get that.
Okay. I was just talking about you. I'm going to read this poem called 5 Tests on Friday. Everyone must take 5 tests on Friday. It's the rule, my granddaughter tells me Friday on our way to school. She is in 2nd grade. I think she believes me, though, when I tell her this isn't true. We are driving over Honey Hill's vast expanse of snowy fields, iced over in yesterday's cold rain, and absolutely a-glitter. 1,000,000 diamonds alight as every drop of sunshine finds its own single snowflake to illuminate. "Look at the snow," I exclaim, amazed. "I see it every day," she says, that new note of ennui that dismays me in her voice. "How is it," I continue, "I am 70 and have never seen a scene just like this before, but you, who are only 7, think you have?" And I can't let it go. And so I continue in my praise of iridescence, of crystalline light, of a world at our feet so full of beauty it makes the heart ache. And in her secret soul, I know she looks and loves it too. But what I wish I'd done, should have thought, then dared to do, is stop the car, leaving it with its books and book bags and time behind, forgetting any school that gives 5 tests on Fridays. Climbed over every farmer's fence we found to leave our footprints on that glistening hillside, so I'd know for sure she knows what it is that matters and what does not. 35 years of teaching, and I could talk forever, and now I can't read 3 poems in a row. The next one's called Wasp Killer. It might be a little controversial. Wasp Killer. For my first act of murder this morning, I rush out early with my can of insecticide, stand before the tiny white paper ball of a new house being built painstakingly attached to my porch light, and spray white poison over it. The beautiful bee inside buzzes out in surprise, her night's work, herself, annihilated in slime. She won't let go, though. Even in death, she clings, her small cylindrical home clutched in her dead feet. Yesterday, a fly I let in the house through carelessness, unswatted, but trapped between window and screen, and left to die a terrifying and miserable death. If I could manage to get that tomato-tasting woodchuck to wander into the street as a delivery truck came zipping by to clip or crush it, I would. Yesterday, a gunman in Texas opened fire in an elementary school and killed 19 children. I'm not comparing kids to critters, not at all. Not equalizing bee disaster with human tragedy. Just asking if a species so easily prone to the power of deadly violence, so willing to wipe out another form of life, can be shocked to learn that given a ready gun and easy ammunition, another of its tribe would go for bigger game, could spew bullets at children the way I step on ants, squish caterpillars between gloved fingers, and slaughter wasps while sipping my morning coffee. It's not the same, you'll say. No, it's not the same. But maybe it rhymes. So I moved to this area as a fiction writer. I've always considered myself a fiction writer, first and foremost. But I met this group of women, and we started writing poetry together, and it was fun. And we'd get together once a month, maybe. We'd read a poem or two. We'd eat a lot of cookies. We'd had a great time. And one of the women in the group talked about this group of writers, the Rag and Bone Poetry Shop here in the other side. And the woman was Sunithi, whom most of you probably know. And Sunithi said to me, "They don't let women read, though." So it was at one of the early jazz concerts when we still served wine. And I think it was a Jane Monheit concert. And I sat through the first half, sipping my wine, having a wonderful time. And I walked out the door. It must have been fall because we were outdoors. And Orrin was out there. I think he was smoking a cigar, and I'd had that glass of wine, you know. So I walked over to Orrin. I said, "How come you don't let women read?" And he said, "Do you want to read?" I said, "Yeah, I want to read." He said, "Well, then come and read." So I've been reading with Will and Orrin ever since then, mostly at Orrin's house, sometimes here for you people. And they are, I had this in the book originally, but I don't know, they are the reason I am writing poetry. Because I went to Orrin's house, I had a bundle of poems. I read those like the first day. I was like, well, if I'm going to read with these guys, I got to have more poems. So, and we do this thing during Lent where we each write a poem every day, and you have to send it to each other no matter how bad or good it is. Then Will says, we should do this for Advent too. So now we're writing poems during Advent. So, at any rate, yeah, I was just going to say that, but I didn't know how many people would get it, Orrin. But anyways, I can't possibly have a poetry reading without hearing from my compatriots. So they have graciously agreed to join me in this reading. And this is Orrin's book that came out a few years ago. It's called My Rap Sheet is Long. If you know Orrin, that will make sense. If you don't, get to know him better. And he's not only... He's agreed to read one of my very favorite poems of all of his. It's called Sunday Drive. Do you need this, Orrin, or you've got it?
Okay. So, anywho, this was a fitting one that Ruth chose in that it's a family poem, and she is the poet of family as far as I'm concerned. Everything she does, she extols family, connection, relationship. This poem, my father probably wasn't terribly fond of most of my poems, and certainly none about him, except I think he would have liked this one because you'll see, it's about his propensity to take these Sunday drives, and they would involve quite often, like it says, it would be unprovisioned, but he would stop at bars and bring all the kids into the bar and get himself a beer, and then he'd get the pool machine going, and nobody knew how to shoot pool, and anyhow, it was all a lot of fun. So anyhow, and then later on, my brother Frank took over taking him on drives as he was very old. And they would drive around listening to Sinatra, endless Sinatra. So anyhow, this is Sunday Drive. My old man knew squat about cars. The hood might as well have been a gateway to another dimension where he had never traveled. He would drive for days with the oil lights flickering. So I'd be sitting in the car and say, "Bud, the oil light's coming on." He didn't have a clue what that meant. He would drive for days with the oil light flickering, oblivious to the engine's impending distress. Had he tried to add a quart of 30 weight, it would have ended up in the radiator. But every Sunday, for as long as anyone remembers, he would take whatever wreck resided in his driveway, 49 Plymouth, 54 Dodge, 61 Valiant, out for an endless, aimless Sunday spin. Bud would pull a passel of kids away from the television, pack them in with no thought for provisions, and flutter off a denobly chomping butterfly following the day's unique whimsy. In those pre-Spall, pre-embargo days of innocence, before malls and subdivisions metastasized across the land and gas soared to $3 a gallon, we had what was pound for pound one of the loveliest landscapes on earth. Our valley passed before his painterly eye, a sweeping succession of landscapes, patchwork hills, Cezanne's, Riverbend, Pissarro's, Van Gogh in the village, Monet in the hay whizzing by through the windshield's wandering frame. These rides were a large part of what made this land my home, imprinting rolling pasture and woodlot, Holstein-dotted hills, humpbacked moraines, shale, shelved brooks, and tree-lined lazy Mohawk upon my young heart. An ectogrome slideshow from a childhood spent riding shotgun or tail gunner. July heat shimmers rising from the road ahead. Doesn't that sound nice now? July heat shimmers rising from the road ahead. Two-lane blacktop soundtrack, tires humming in fresh air, moving water mirage spilled across the asphalt, and us singing the old man's songs. Don't you listen to him, Dan? He's a devil, not a man, and he spreads the burning sand with water. Cool, clear water. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. This next one I'm going to read, I have either read this one or that one, so I guess it's time to make a decision. It's called Thoughts on Hedy Lamarr and the Notre Dame Cathedral. Do y'all know who Hedy Lamarr is, all you youngins in the back? I hear you, Alexis. It's the things we think can't happen that toss us when they do. A husband leaving, a cathedral, a fire, fascists in America. How innocence ends in knowledge, possibility on earth of man, when we realize absolutely that absolutely nothing lasts, not even illusions. Last night, while Notre Dame burned, I learned that Hedy Lamarr, the most gorgeous woman of her time, bore inside that beautiful head a magnificent brain that she managed to use despite a world's refusal to think she might think. Take out your cell phone, see photos of the fallen spire, text an ex-husband, read a crazy president's tweets, and you access technology invented by Hedy Lamarr. Now there's a bombshell for you. Is there such a thing as too much beauty? A woman so gorgeous no one sees inside? A cathedral iconic as the gates of heaven, making everyone feel it can last forever? Gargoyles must have blinked to let set the spark that burned the cathedral. Inside, a thorn, that nail, a splinter of crosswood, wouldn't have stood a chance, but survived. If art doesn't matter and religion is passé, why the deep despair when a cathedral burns in Paris or anywhere? Or giant Buddhas are raised in Bamiyan, a stone's throw at a pietà. In symbol resides our strength, in art, our soul. Christ said he'd tear down the tabernacle and raise it in 3 days. Holy Week, and the cathedral's ablaze. People circle the pyre, singing hymns to the lost God. What happens next is what matters most. I'm going to read one more, and then if you need a little break, we can take a little break. And if you don't need one, I'll keep reading. So that's your assignment. Figure it out while I'm reading. This one's called The Great American Poem of the Catskills. And I don't think I can read it as fast as it should be read, but I'm going to try. The Great American Poem of the Catskills begins with a baby. All things do, don't they? And if she is happy, all the better. or if he is cooing or suckling, then life, because it is life, is good and a world can grow. Though the poem must know that the Catskill baby and the Adirondack baby are maybe not the Appalachian baby or the Alpine, the Himalayan, the Ural babies. And besides the mountains, we must remember the steppes and plains, deserts and river valleys, all earth's crannies, which cradle babies who cry for the milk of the world. These too, these especially, must be fed and petted, praised and pleased until they are happy. A host of heavenly, smiling babies popping from mother's laps and father's shoulders, like daisies sprouting from mown lawns, or chicory and Queen Anne's lace along the roadside waste. The pudgy-footed, waddle-walked gait of toddlers opening small palms, tiny fingers, reaching for the right of single-toothed gums to great contentment. The Buddha's bellies of smiling, sated babies are the only answer, but they answer everything. Smooth-skinned softness of baby flesh is the only rule for writing the great American poem, the great Asian poem, the great European poem, the great African, Antarctic, Australian poem, the great American poem of the Catskills or anywhere begins with babies. All things always do. If we would tend to the babies, the poems would write themselves, and they would all be great. You need to move? Okay. I neglected my pal Kim back there, who makes all of this possible. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't met Kim. Sunithi was responsible for that, too. I was sleeping in the upstairs of the cafe one day, and she said, "Oh, here, I want you to meet Kim Domenico." I said, "I've always wanted to meet Kim Domenico." Thank you, Kim.
They have the same birthday.
We do. We have the same birthday. So Will told you about our checkered past, and Will be here next month, April 3rd, not next month, April 3rd, to read from his brand new publication called Adding Saffron, which I finished yesterday, and I'm here to tell you it is magnificent. I chose to ask Will to read the hardest poem in there to read because there's German in it, but we've got Reiner, so I think we're going to be all right. It's called Owner, and if you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter. You're going to learn it in a minute or two.
I'm sneaking to the podium. Yeah, I had Reiner go over this with me before, but as I just a monoglot. I just didn't learn a language soon enough, and I don't feel like butchering German in his presence, so I will read an English version of the line. But anyway, yeah, thanks, Ruth, for she's been emailing me every day, telling me, "Will, I've read that one, and that's great, and this line is beautiful," and it's helped me because I've been at work, and I work in the hospital. I'm a nurse in the hospital, and some days you just need a little pick-me-up, so Ruth's been picking me up. So thank you for inviting me to read with you, Ruth. Yes, Owner is a derogatory label used by some people, blues musicians mostly, and they use it for people who own Hohner harmonicas but who are unable to play them, and that includes me. I can't play them, but I have some. In pictures taken of him during the Second World War, my grandfather is lean and wears a mustache. He tears a smile across his face for the camera. Germany, circa 1944. His unit intercepts a train. Inside the boxcars, the men find full crates of chocolate, cameras, and Hohner echo harp harmonicas. Funny things to ship during war, I thought as a kid when he told his story. Could you load G-clefs into your gun or kill the enemy with a bent E-flat? Grandpa was no blues man. Bible meeting, that was his style. He'd rehearse hymns on this harp or the Statler Brothers if he was in the mood. When I play it now, it warbles like an extinct songbird, brought back to life, trying to recall its key. I keep it in the original box, green where the paper isn't worn away, decorated with Alps and ski chalets. A man is walking alone toward the mountains. Germany, idealized. Inside, bright pink paper lines the box. A tag states, Hohner harmonicas are a prime example of German quality work, as were Panzers. Also the chocolates and camera that Grandpa shipped home to his youngest brother, both confiscated in transits. But he kept the harp. I wish there were a picture of him when he opened the crates, expecting rations or ammunition. Instead, 100 silver birds slept in their green cardboard cages. He took this one and slipped it in his pocket, a distraction from the earworm whistling of bombs. And when he played, he didn't care who heard him or how his music sounded. Thank you.
So I learned a lot about putting on programs from Zora's ballet teacher, Nancy Long. And her first rule is you do the hard stuff first to prove that you can, and then you have fun in the second half. And her other rule, those of you who had to wait for a chair, is never set up more chairs than you think you're going to have people, because you don't want to read to an empty room. So we're going to do some fun stuff now. One day, I don't know if it was last summer or the summer before, we were reading on Oren's back porch, and Oren said, everybody has to go home. I can't see you. Everyone has to go home, and tomorrow you have to write a hot and sweaty poem. And I thought you might need a hot and sweaty poem today. So here it is. Hemingway went to Paris to write about America, advised such dislocation as essential to perspective, so he'd see no reason I cannot write a hot and sweaty poem in the cool of an August morning on the patio with bird chirp, tire whine, kayak strapped yellowly on the car, awaiting a paddle in some small Adirondack lake where the sweaty hot of today's expected weather won't quite reach. So for that tar-blistering, crayon-melting kind of heat, I'll need to retreat to the past. Some summer day a laze on my grandmother's back porch, or tucked in the cool den of my friend's shrub-hidden concrete stoop, beside which we once found a maggoty frog that I was the only one brave enough to move. Or the way my mother used to sit, arms and legs dangling from rolled-up sleeves and pant legs, thick kind of bouffant hair in place, saying, "Don't touch me, it's too hot." Who would, though, take you to a faucet, run it cold, and dip your wrists to cool your circulating blood. So hot it hurt to push through thick air, too hot to breathe when even a shower can't soothe, because even wet you wipe sweat, when the only thing to do is to give in to heat, meld and melt and not mind slick limbs, dripping torso, a good time for making love in crumpled sheets of sodden with the salivas of life, because why not? You are already too hot, too wet, too miserable to move, but needing to move, you might as well let all that heat heap a pinnacle of pleasure, also hot and sweet. But I diverge. Just another 90-degree day of swimming through shimmering, slippery air, of sucking steam out of a drenched, demented world, of waiting in a hot bed for the cool of another morning and the blue words from another pen, appreciating every moment of summer's easy heat, knowing cold will come when no amount of effort will recreate the feel of this hot, sweaty August afternoon to be. Both the people in this next poem are in the room today. One is Zora. The other is my artist friend in the back there, Bonnie. I don't think you've ever heard this one, Bon. On the swing set. Yesterday on the swing set, my granddaughter told me trees make the wind, then explained in intricate detail how that happens, what the branches did, and how everything worked together. It was like sitting before some ancient native elder, not a New World 3-year-old, but someone who knew, who could tell the story plain and true. During the last windstorm, my friend, the artist, wrote to say she was trying to paint the wind. And now I wonder if she knows about how the branches work. My granddaughter loves the wind the way I used to love it. She trusts trees, doesn't need, as I do now, to fearfully eye an eerily swaying pine, cringe at crackling overhead limbs. She just swings, adding her own gust to the whirl, secure in her sure understanding of wind, that original holiest of spirits, sifting blessings on those who can still believe. My grandson decided that sitting listening to Nani read poems to other people wasn't his favorite thing to do, so I'm going to read a poem about him, but he's not here to hear it. And I told my kids the other day, I said, I'm going to read poems about the kids. And my son and daughter stood like deer in the headlights. I was like, not you guys. And I was feeling really bad because when I put this book together, I discovered I had no poems about my own children. And I realized yesterday or Thursday or whenever it was, they were glad about that. So this one's about Buddy. At the temple. Yesterday at the Buddhist temple, baby grandson riding the lions, an ancient woman from an ancient land crouched in the garden, saw us, smiled her strange smile, hummed something like hello, and came to us in her conical hat to see the baby. Then, back to work, she reached into her bag and plucked clumps of beautiful, bright green watercress, tiny leafed, intricate stemmed, and thrust at us the bouquet, a gift. Here, where it was, we were obliged to bring offering. Supernatural, the peace a plump-handed child can wave into being. Is that why, do you think, we seem so intent on killing them, letting them be killed? We carried home our baby whole and safe, and our bounty fresh and clean, tossed the watercress into a salad with apples and Romano, and swallowed the host it was, knowing. This is the last poem I'm going to read from the book. I'm going to close with a real short one because it seemed important to show you that I didn't stop writing after the book. And I don't know why I chose this one to end with, but I kind of like it, and I know Oren likes it. It's called Men and Meat. At the Christmas tree farm, because I was the only one, because I didn't have any cash, because it was cold, the tree cutter invited me into the barn to write my check. 3 big men in lumberjack clothes stood or sat around a kitchen counter preparing food. The biggest man, the owner, in tan canvas coveralls, sliced piles of dark red meat onto huge trays. Another, seated, peeled mounds of potatoes. A feast for the tree farm workers here near the close of Christmas tree season. The big man caused a corner of the counter cleared for me. I wrote my check, surrounded by men and meat. Slabs and slabs, dark and bloody. I don't remember if I asked or if the man just offered the answer. Moose and elk, sliced thin and piled high. Elk and moose laid bare before me like any saint's head on a platter. The man's hands purpled with the blood of wild animals. Which, I wondered, needed to know somehow, was which. This, in the closer tray, had once been an antlered moose twice as big at least as the biggest man. On the farther tray lay elk, darker, tougher looking. Does an elk run more or faster than a moose? The tiny room thick with the hovering wild spirits. Just moose and elk, though, this year, the man explained. Bloodied fingers fingering the knife, fingering a trigger that brought down the animal that belonged to the sanguine spiralings from his fingertips. No mountain lion this time, because no one got one, no one shot one. My mouth filled with a metallic taste and the miasma of meat. Moose and elk, but no mountain lion this year. Meat is not usually a food I choose to eat. But this meal, to swallow a morsel of moose or elk, to carry away from the cold, cold table that spirit of wild, I would do that. I would swallow it just to know. A contemporary Eve eating her way back to paradise. Imagine walking home down a snowy hill, dragging a fresh-cut tree behind me, the blood of a mountain lion coursing through my veins, pushing into me all the courage and cunning of any wild cat, one too wild even to be killed. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming out. I'm going to close with a really tiny poem called Fox Poem. It's going to be published in the next issue of Stone Canoe, which is the literary magazine from the YMCA in Syracuse. It's a beautiful magazine. You should just pick one up sometime. I was going to thank Tom Townsley, who was the poetry editor who picked this to publish, but he's not here. I will tell him some other time. It's called Fox Poem. Russ, you might remember my telling you this story. Yesterday's fox stopped, half turned, half stayed, the way a fox will, being two things at once and daring both. Mottled coat, those delicate fairy tale feet, one poised as if to point the way, a way for me to follow, as if to say, I know another shapeshifter when I see one. Those dark, deep eyes which never leave the forest, which carry trees with them, in them. Thank you so much. Don't forget Will on April 3rd. He's at night. He's got younger friends than I do, so they're coming out at 7.
I don't know if we want to do a little. You want to do a little question and answer thing, or do you?
Oh yeah, I can answer questions.
Anybody want to ask Ruth any questions about her book? If not, that's fine.
I probably told you everything. You can have cookies and do what you want.
Let us think. Let us give us time to think.
I will tell you, Anne, that every time I hang up clothes, I think of your poem about the little thing that hung on your mother's clothesline that kept the clothespins, because I don't have one. And every time I'm running to get more clothespins, I think I wish I had one. Anne's mom. I'll ask a question. You all know that I'm pretty technologically unastute. Challenged. Thank you. That's the word. I got a text message this morning from someone who said, can't wait to be at your reading. And I was like, good, someone's coming. But I didn't have your number in my phone book. So if you texted me that, thank you for coming. I hope you're here.
Write back and say, I got a new phone recently, so I don't have your friends. So who is this? That's what I was doing.
Okay. Russ solves all my problems.
Ruth, can you tell us about how you decided to order your poems? Because that's a big challenge.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I ordered the poems in a way that, I just talked to Will about this, in a way that I thought made sense to me. And it wasn't like chronologically, but it was very ordered. And I sent them to Will, and he said, you can't order them this way. I was like, what do you mean I can't order them this way? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. And I sort of went from one to the next and fed them in. I sent it back. I was like, is this better? He said, yes. And when I got the book and I read it straight through, I wrote him an email just the other day and said, thank you. This worked a whole lot better. I appreciate your making me do it. But to tell you how I did it, I can't really. Yeah.
How did you decide which poems to put in it? And what was to leave out that you...
That was easier than deciding what order to put them in, because I figure I write in three veins. I write family poems, I write political poems, and I write nature poems. So I wanted to have a mix of those. I didn't want this reading to take too long, but I got a couple kayaking poems in here I would have liked you ladies to hear me read. Any other questions?
How do you, go ahead, who's going to
Russ.
You've always been writing poetry, or have you just had like a sudden spurt ever since you tied in with these guys?
I wrote my first poem in 10th grade geometry class because I was bored. But mostly, yeah, I do poem. I thought I was doing poetry on the side, and I was really a fiction writer. You know that. So.
Were you influenced by Ruth Walker? Is it Walker?
I know who you mean. It's Ruth Stone? Do you mean Ruth?
The one who wrote Purple.
Alice Walker.
Alice Walker.
Oh my gosh. You are amazing, Frances. She is my primary influence for poetry writing. You can tell because they're long, skinny poems like hers.
Well, you taught that course that was all about Alice Walker's poems.
Oh, I forgot about that. But yes, very much so. She and E.E. Cummings. I read in 7th grade. My English teacher took us to the library and made us take out a poetry book, and I took out a giant tome of E.E. Cummings poetry. And as I was reading through it, Zora, excuse Grandma, I saw a poem and it had the word dog shit in it, and I thought, I did not know you could write poetry about dog shit. And I've been a fan ever since.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about, I said we write back and forth, but how do you specifically come up with a poem? And I know you're sitting in a chair, right, in the morning, you've got your pen and your paper, but...
I do a lot of what Orrin does. I think, I can't remember who's told you to do this, but the first thing you look at, you just start writing about who? William Stafford.
Following the golden thread.
The other thing I do a lot of is if I'm going through my day and something happens and I say, that'd make a great poem, I jot a note in my journal and then I get to that. I was writing the other day on, I happened to think, I wonder what I would be writing if I hadn't grown up just as television came on the scene. Because I know a lot of my stories are influenced by television shows. So I thought, I wonder if I'd be a better writer if that hadn't happened. So I wrote on that for a while. When we're writing for Lent and you gotta do it, I've got a poem titled, How Good of a Poem Can I Write in 10 Minutes?
Do the Lenten poems and the Advent poems, that time of year and what they're prepping for, influence what you write?
Yes. Orrin's got a whole series of Sabbath poems, just time, I think, does that. Or we tend to write about what's going on in our lives, so if you're putting up the Christmas tree, there's going to be a Christmas tree poem.
I meant in the religious sense, the birth and the death.
Oh, probably. Sometimes, not always, but I know for me, I think you're right. I have one about, I started collecting nativity scenes a lot 20 years ago. I had a couple nice ones. And then you know what happens if you collect something, people just keep giving you more and more and more of them. So I think I counted 25 the last time. But when I wrote the poem about it, it was the year I found out my daughter was pregnant with my granddaughter. So, that nativity played into it.
Nice.
I wanted to bring with me, and I couldn't find it in the last second here, but I have a magazine that must go back 30 years or more, with you in it, with a picture of you. You're heavier than you are now, and your married name. And it talks about you had something on NPR, even for you've been at this a long time. Yeah. You already had something
Mike
on
was a
NPR.
baby, I remember, because I had to take him to the doctors the day I found out about it. I wrote the very first story that I really ever published was called A Boy with a Permanent Smile. And it was written after after my all-time favorite student, a senior in high school, was killed by another of my favorite students in a car accident. So I always had struggled with that a little because I got to publish the story. It got chosen to be on NPR's, I can't remember the name of it, but they read stories.
Right.
And it was Alan Shoes. I'm not going to try to remember it. But they sent me a cassette tape, if you remember what those are, of it being read. And they said it was read as far away as Alaska. So I always imagined some people in an igloo listening to a story about Tim Brewster. So, yeah, that was a long time ago. We good? Okay, thank you very much.
Will's got a special on books today. Buy one, get one. Anybody's book, doesn't have to be mine.